Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with Stalwarts of Music. Today's episode is being partnered along with Perpetual Buzz Experiences, which is an artist representation company, and they have three very basic but lofty goals. They're the launchpad for indie musicians, helping them leverage success in the best possible way, helping produce some of the most memorable experiences, and the process also involves great amount of funding for social causes and make sure that artists and people receiving have a great time in the process. Be sure to check them out on www.perpetualbuzz.com. We have yet another podcast partner, which is Wire Up Music Store, one of the finest music retail stores with state of art equipment, your one stop solution for musical gear, ranging from guitars to ukulele, percussive to classical instruments. Do check out their Instagram page, which goes by the handle @wireup.india. My guest today is from the world of electronica and world music. He began his career as a drummer at quite an early age, receiving his first ever drum set at the age of 2. Having taught himself throughout his childhood, he broke out into the professional music space at the age of 18. He joined the Monty Alexander Group and he toured with several other groups that launched him to the major jazz music scene. And he's featured at the North Sea Jazz Festival at Rotterdam, the Montreux Jazz Festival, and a couple of other interesting occasions in Athens and other parts of the world. He has culminated all of his sensibilities having collaborated with jazz greats that are ranging from artists like Dizzy Gillespie to Nina Simone. He's known to blend in so many different styles of music ranging from jazz, drum and bass, and he's got this signature style which is called jungle. A culmination of all of these influences has sort of provocated him to focus in a direction along with his passion project, Jojo Mayer and the Nerve. This entire project involves techniques such as reverse engineering, which is a phrase that is borrowed from computing. And he executes his approach using various methods wherein he uses complex sensibilities of being a drummer. A lot of these techniques has made him play at astonishing speeds that one couldn't even possibly think of. A few of his main influences are legends like Tony Williams, Buddy Rich, and he's a leader, as I mentioned earlier, of the group, the supergroup, to put it right, Jojo Mayer and the Nerve. Without any further ado, I'm delighted to welcome my guest for today, Jojo Mayer. He'll be joining us in a few. Hi, Jojo. Namaste. How are you?
Aditya, how are you doing?
Very well.
Very well.
Very well, thank you. Which part? It looks so beautiful. Where are you at?
I'm in Europe. I'm in Switzerland.
Oh, wonderful. So that's home ground, I believe.
Well, since a year, yeah. After living in New York for 30 years, I moved to Switzerland. I'm originally from Switzerland.
I know that. I'm aware of that. Great. So let's get started with our agenda for today. I have some very interesting questions coming your way.
Okay.
So, Jojo, you have performed wearing so many different hats. Which is sort of the most preferred one for you?
Well, I think the most preferred one is to being able to express myself authentically, without having to wear a hat. Just being able to be myself, really. There's there's a lot of situations where you cater to as aiding or providing to another idea, and sometimes there's an overlap, but I've been a sideman for many years, and for pretty much the past 20 years, I decided to just do my own projects and do my own music, and I still collaborate with other people, but I don't do sideman work
Hmm.
of that nature anymore. So I kind of took off that hat, so so to speak.
A lot of them have quoted you as a drummer who's physical, very physical, in the sense that you seem to have a huge bond going on with your particular instrument that transcends to a lot more than just the role of performance, right? In terms of serving that, one could call it as a medium of simulating contemporary aesthetics, and some would call it abstraction of a musical form like electronic music in real time, which is essentially what you do. And you have explored
Mhm.
and devised the clapping technique, amen breaks, finger technique, etc. How have they helped you with the practice and from the aspect of performance?
Well, okay, this is that question encompasses a lot of different areas. So let's address the first one. The drums is a very physical instrument.
Hmm.
It's very physical. It's very kinetic, also, like visually. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of
Yeah,
movement.
yeah,
I mean, to play a wind instrument is very physical too, but it's not as visible to the spectator. You know,
correct. Yeah,
so I think you're relating to the physicality of the visual appearance of drumming, which is kind of like spectacular because kinetic. A lot of things are going on,
hmm,
and of course, any instrument that like requires a physical engagement,
hmm,
it's a good idea to use technology that makes it easier for you to execute those type of things. You don't need to have proper technique to play musically, express yourself way, but it can be very tiring. So as you go to like a certain eras or certain aspects of speed or dynamics, a proper knowledge of how to execute those things in the most easy way comes in very, very handy. So I beside the fact that I started to play the drums when I was very young, like 2 years old, so naturally developed a natural relationship with the instrument. I was always on the outlook to like learn as much about the instrument, technically, but of course, culturally as well.
yeah,
Which brings it to the second uh, part of the question. To me, yes, I am a drummer, but my role as a drummer is subordinated to my role as a musician. And I think my role as a musician is subordinated to my role as an artist. And I understand music as art. I mean, music doesn't have to be art. It can be many different things. It can be there's entertainment, and it's a lot of different things. But to me, art is close to my heart. And my understanding of art is it's a platform to experiment with new ideas. It's an
yeah,
experiment. It's art comes before science. It comes before society. It's usually and the great artists are the people that open the door to
hmm,
a new understanding or a different understanding to how we live or how we could live. So I think art and the future outlook are very related. Brian Eno once said something really beautiful. He said, like, he understands art as a tool that mankind has been using to push themselves into the future.
got it.
And I can relate to that. And so I'm interested in discovery. I'm interested in deviating from the norm. I'm interested in progress. I'm interested in new syntax because all my heroes throughout art and music, when we talk about music, they were all pioneers. And I'm fascinating by people that are courageous enough step into the unknown, because all the new things, they wait in the unknown to be discovered. So this is my general artistic point of view.
I really appreciate the fact that, you've sort of transcended and evolved as a musician. You've seen several many faces, and still there's like this rigor within you to explore new facets of creativity, which is totally commendable. I give it to you for that.
Thank you.
In the niche that you cater to, which essentially involves drum, bass, and beats and a lot of electronics, right? It is difficult to use a conventional methodology of response and understanding it. If we were to look at layman, there are two kinds of responding to music, right? Two kinds of response. From an audience standpoint, it can be either those who are educated in the vocabulary that you cater to and the discourse of science around it, and those who are purely like me, who respond from the gut.
Yes.
What is your take on that in terms of the responses of the audiences?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a very good question, and it's a deep question. And I appreciate you answering this question, because it's a very, very interesting field,
Mm-hmm.
and there's many different ways, many different viewpoints to look at that. The way I see it is, I don't believe, and this is not the common notion that most people have. I don't believe that music intrinsically is emotional. I don't believe so. You can have a sincerely emotional person
Yeah.
sitting behind an instrument,
Mm-hmm.
and but that person does not have the technology or the understanding how to translate through the focus of this instrument. So it will arrive on the other side as like, yeah, well, this person plays the bongos really emotionally, but it doesn't touch me really. This is one thing. So you actually have to know where the ropes are. Like to give you a very a blatant example. Let's say, for instance, see a person like Steven Spielberg
Mm-hmm.
knows where the ropes are. He said, okay, I want you to smile, I want you to laugh, I want you to cry, I want you to be scared. So he knows how to create those responses from you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those responses are culturally conditioned. Um, you know, um, Having someone slip on a banana peel will make most people laugh around the globe, although it's kind of like a very drama thing because a person is getting hurt.
Right.
So it's actually not something. It's not a laughing matter, but it's a slapstick thing, and uh, some things will make a person scared, like a wild animal that can devour you, so, or the noise of a wild animal. So these responses, like we can translate them in art and in music as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when say like when like musically, music lives from contrast, and music lives from dynamics, and those dynamics, we are able to evocate these emotional responses, to basically to create an emotional response without operating those ropes is very difficult. But I'm very interested in it, because if you manage to do that, you discover the pure artistic form, and we all steal, we all copy from. It's a part of learning, assimilation. But at the point where you get artistically to the point where say, okay, then I think the true values punch through. Like values like honesty, compassion, humor, courage. Now, throughout the ages, the surface of those things has changed. This is why it's important to renovate into a new shape. This is what all the people, if you allow me to quote another person, that was Gustav Mahler, the composer. He
Mm-hmm.
once said, uh, the tradition is not to pray to the ashes, but to pass on the fire. And the way I see it, there's only one fire, and it's the same in Mozart, it's the same in Stravinsky, it's the same in Duke Ellington, it's the same in John Coltrane or Charlie Parker. But it's also the same with the Beatles and Hendrix and Pink Floyd and Aphex Twin, or you know what I'm saying? Like I think that flame reincarnates when an old body becomes rigid, you know. So I think the emotional response happens at the moment where you are able to connect in some way. And that moment you can create by different means, by manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
but also by honesty. So I'm interested in the honesty moment. But of
Wonderful.
course, I know, I know certain things will just trigger an emotional response. You
Mm-hmm.
know, physical display of ability very often does that. Now, to conclude this, I mean, we could talk for the rest of the show only about this because it's a great subject. It's very fascinating. But maybe what I would like to add about this is, um, you know, how should I put this in a very short, condensed, uh, you know, when this emotional response, you can, how should I say, give me one thing. I'm trying to bring a lot of
Yeah.
information into a
Take your
short.
time. That's all right.
Um, um, well, I think okay. Let's move on to the next question because
All
maybe
right.
it will come back to me. It's
Sure.
this is I think a lot about those things and
Got
the
it.
emotional re- responses. Actually, I have it. I got it. Very often there's certain notions when someone is very virtuosic
Mm-hmm.
in his, and does something that like astounds people or impresses people.
Yeah.
Being impressed is also an emotional response, but it's not as deep. I think what is very important, it's not the technological, complexity that
Mm-hmm.
pushes people away. Usually say, okay, this is too complex, people don't get it, and you will lose people because it's too abstract. And I'm not sure if this is true. I believe that even if you've been in the most complex display of art or music, if the emotional element exists,
Mm-hmm.
it will translate. This is what I'm saying. So I don't think I think even music which can be very difficult to listen to and say, okay, I don't get it. This stuff doesn't touch me at all. Usually it's not because it's complicated. Usually it's because the claim was not to transport something emotional, but the claim was to display abilities. I think this is the only problem, that
Sure.
would maybe consolidate my point of view about complexity
Got it.
versus simplicity, you know.
Since we're already in the topic of your music, as a matter of fact, your audience base in different parts of the world is essentially huge, and it's still picking up by the day. And there is a great deal of interest in your particular art form. I'm referring to Jojo Mayer and the Nerve. Artistry survives despite complaints about problems with the organic artistry being depicted in electronic music and what have you. There obviously is an interest, role, and place for the music that you play. What is this place?
Okay, I hope I understand your question because
Mm-hmm.
again, it's a very multi-layered question. Um, I'm trying to bring things together.
Yeah.
I'm very, I have a deep interest in history and
Hmm.
culture. Going back very, very, very long. I'm trying to observe carefully things that happen. I'm trying to understand them as well. I don't always understand them, but I see. Okay, when we talk about the flame that I mentioned, what is it that I love about Mozart?
Hmm.
What is it that I love about Coltrane? What is it that I love about Hendrix? What is it that I love about Aphex Twin? Trying to, what unifies those artists? Because on the surface, it's very obvious that they're very, very different.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in what connects them. I think for me, they express those values that I mentioned before.
Hmm.
Curiosity, they fearlessness in a way,
Yeah.
they authenticity, uniqueness, and I'm trying to um, be able to create a body for those for those values. I'm trying to create a body for the flame, basically.
Got
And
it.
I know it's not going to last forever. And it will, at some point they will die out and become rigid. As I'm saying, as much as I love jazz, and I played jazz for all my life, and I love this music, and it's an incredible achievement, possibly the most important American art form that was created. But jazz, for very long, has reached the apex of its relevancy. And there's
Correct.
still people that play this art form very beautifully and
Hmm.
very skillfully. But if you compare the first half of, like, the first 50 years with the last 50 years of jazz, the first 50 years were an incredible, refreshing revolution. Every 10 years there was something new, from New Orleans swing, a big band, bebop, post bop, cool jazz, free jazz, fusion, and that happened in a very, very short time. And looking back from here, the past 40 years, we didn't have this momentum anymore. It went to other places for a minute, and it was in rock music and in R&B, in hip hop. Then it was in electronic music, and it's not in those styles anymore. Like all these styles, after a while, they become subject to the business and catalogization. We need to put a label on it so we can
Correct.
sell it to people,
Hmm.
etc., etc., etc. So it becomes compartmentalized, and the aspect of exploration has to yield to the aspect of exploitation. Where I think in any successful business, exploitation and exploration have to be in a balance. If this stops, the art form dies. It becomes a dead art form. So when I started Nerve, electronic music had an extreme, it was extremely powerful. There's a lot of new things, like, I mean, jungle and drum and bass and break beats and techno in the early mid '90s. This was like opening the door wide open for a lot of new things. And because we live now, the media exchange works much faster than it did in the '50s
Correct.
when bebop was, the shelf life and the lifespan for its relevancy was shortened. It was like a flash, and then, but I started this idea of, okay, I could reverse engineer uh, machine behavior to human behavior and see what happens. It was an experiment, and
Yeah.
people liked it, and so this was basically the basic idea. It's like it was an idea of contrast. I put a human element into something that does not necessarily have that human element, and also add an element of improvisation, which is very close to me. I think it's the highest form of playing music is to improvise, is to make things up, to compose things on the spot. So it's a great feeling to being able. It's very empowering to be able to improvise. I mean, anyone who had the experience of like away from music having to improvise. Let's say you have unexpected guests for dinner,
Mhm.
and you conjure something up, you improvise, and after, okay, like you didn't go shopping, you didn't prepare anything, but you make something and it turns to be a great evening. It's empowering. Well, I was able to do that. So in music, it's like this too. But so adding those things to kind of bring those art forms together, because electronic music is a premeditated art form and jazz is an improvisational art form. So that was the idea, to bring those things together. And that was basically started the point of interest of people to pay attention to what we do. You know,
And
it's
I'm sure you fared well in that pursuit. I'm talking to you from India, all the way from India, and
well, in the Indian, I mean, India is a place of music and culture.
yeah.
And when we talk about rhythm,
Hmm.
I mean, the Indian alphabet and syntax of rhythm, I think is hundreds, if not thousands, years ahead of the Western world. It's intimidating, and there's so much to learn from it. It's so deep. So I think the Indian audience has a profound understanding of rhythm. So and what I do is not, I don't, I mean, sometimes I play simple beats, but sometimes I unpack it, and it's great if an audience can follow, and has this curiosity. And in India, I definitely encounter the audience that can come on a trip with me, and it's lovely. It's lovely. I
Thank you for
mean,
that.
for maybe to make a little bit a bridge. I don't know where, I have some other question, but currently what I'm working on,
Hmm.
which is like a solo project, basically,
Okay.
um, which is working with new music technologies.
Oh
So
wow.
with any, in order for Hendrix to do what he did, the electric guitar had to be invented. In
Hmm.
order for Bach to do what he did, the pianoforte had to be invented. In
Great.
order for jazz to be popular, the technology to record sound had to be invented, because we needed the means to capture an improvisation,
Great.
which, without a doubt, Mozart and Bach, they were master improvisers, but they didn't have the means to record their
Great.
improvisations. So jazz needed the technology of sound recording to
Hmm.
become popular and to spread out. So with anything, movies, film, so new technologies enable new art, and
Yeah.
right now, with AI coming towards us, and algorithmic technologies, and generative music, I started to have a deeper interest in it, and
Yeah.
I did at the before Corona.
Hmm.
Brian Eno invited me to do some experiments at his studio in London, and it
Was it the
was
cyber illusion ist you're talking about?
no, that was just something like, he said, okay, you want to come to London, like, and
Okay.
we'll tinker around with some stuff, then.
Got it.
And Eno is, he's always been on the spearhead of those technologies. And although I was acquainted for it, I never went deep into it, despite the fact that I was to a big degree uh, inspired by electronic music. So in the process, I thought to myself, wow, this is really going to be an important part of the future of
Yeah.
music creation. And if I had a year off, I would get into it, you
Yeah.
know, because it's a steep learning curve.
Right.
And then Corona came. All touring got canceled.
Yeah.
A lot of my activities were on hold. So I had this year off, and actually more than a year. So I started to experiment with those technologies, started to learn about it, and from this came my upcoming project, which I'll launch in Paris for the first time
Yeah.
at the end of this month, and it's called Me Machine.
Oh wow. Yeah.
It's basically it's it's basically the reverse of what I've been doing with Nerve in a way, because um, Nerve is about humans imitating the idiosyncrasies of a machine. And now I'm collaborating with a computer that can react to my playing. So I'm teaching the computer human behavior,
Okay.
and I'm teaching the computer to somehow improvise, so I can sort of, I can program the computer to how to erratic or how chaotic it will behave to what I put into the computer with my drumming, and then what comes out um, can be very surprising. So it really challenges my improvisational skill to legitimize the computer's innovations. So in a way, it's like now it's a human that is imitating the idiosyncrasies or the behavior of a machine,
Yeah.
playing music with a computer that imitates the behavior of a human. And I think that's, I'm just at the beginning of this, but I'm very fascinated, and I think a part of where we're heading with the future, this is going to be an important part, and things that we never heard
Yeah.
is going to come out of this, and like the question is, in order for us to identify music as music, we need things that are familiar to us, you know so like the level of abstraction can be, with those new tools, can completely surpass uh, the abstraction of humans, but in order not to lose the emotionality, that becomes a challenge. It's not just the technical stuff, but what I've been thinking of very, very, very much is, growing up in the last century, where you can identify the 60s. We know what the 60s looked like, what they
Yeah.
sounded like. The 70s, we know they were different than the 60s, or they different clothes, different style, different music. The 80s, the 90s, they all had these different things that we can completely relate to from the surface. Now, from the past 20 years, that surface has somehow flatlined. Everything is, a lot of things are retro, and like we don't have these crazy aesthetical changes. So with this new instrument that gives me the skeletal tools to create really new music, it still has to wear an aesthetic surface. And what is this aesthetic surface? What are the aesthetics of
Mhm.
the time that we live in after 20 years of flatlining
Right.
aesthetically? So this has been one of the bigger challenges artistically, you know, stepping into the unknown futures, so to say.
Very, very interesting process. On that note, I'd like to ask you another question. Would you ever consider your music, say a performance or maybe a session of yours on the metaverse? Since we are in the epicenter of technology at this point.
Well, I'm not an expert on it.
Okay.
I personally think the metaverse is a hype.
Got it.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't
Right.
think it's going to happen. Like this. I mean, there's billions of monies at stake in
Correct.
it. You
Correct.
know,
Yeah.
but I think it's a bubble. It's a
Right.
bubble. I distrust it. I distrust it. I don't think it's going to work. Uh, Too much hype. I mean, with a lot of AI things as well. I mean, we're not even close to the narrative of some people, from my observation. As I said, I'm not an expert. I might there's some information that I might not have, but I'm trying to follow my curiosity and look at things and observe them carefully. And I think there's a lot of money behind it and a lot of hype, but things are going to come out from it. Not every future technology is AI or like metaverse.
Yeah.
But the metaverse, I don't think so. No.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, look. If someone approaches me with a proposition that gives me an opportunity to learn more about this, you know, I would definitely think about it. But just basically, am I going to see a Jojo Mayer avatar in the in the metaverse? From what I know right now, probably not.
Hmm. Okay. Sounds fair to me.
Well, the future is not just electronic tools, but the future is also a lot of other elements. Like we have climate change,
Yeah.
we have great obstacles for which we need to find solutions. We need to adjust as a society in order to to reach certain goals. And I think those will also have a profound effect of the future about the way we live, the way we perceive art and life and music as well. So
Yeah.
this will also bring out new art forms. I mean, just to give you an example, Led Zeppelin or Kiss, they used to tour around the world with a Boeing 747 with a jumbo jet.
Yeah.
You know, to do this nowadays would be completely irresponsible and completely neglecting
Correct.
the aspect of sustainability.
Yeah.
So touring around the world as a musician, things like climate change will also have a profound impact
Impact. Yeah.
on our behaviors, and go like, okay, are we still going to be able to do that, or we'll have to create some new ideas for it? Things will be more local, in the same way that those big metropolitan eras, like whatever, in the last century, Paris, London, New York, Tokyo, they will be losing their relevance culturally. They will be maybe some financial playgrounds, but I strongly believe that the new culture, since we have this, and
Hmm.
will come from microscopical cells of, you know 12 people in a small medium-sized city. Great culture could come from everywhere, and it comes from everywhere. It's just the mainstream right now has been controlled, I think, by tools that are being operated like we used to operate things in the past century. you
Hmm.
know so we need the new platforms and the new tools to be congruent with a new situation globally. You know,
Got it.
so those things will have also a very, very big effect on our cultural life and our cultural perception.
Speaking of the arts, one problem that we do have in the arts is the underlying question whether you want to create clones of yourself or would you like the individual within you to emerge? Sometimes the individual might be mistaken for the ego, and if you encourage too much of it, you might have somebody who's a little monster. Uh,
Oh
Tony
yes. Yeah.
Tony Williams has been a major inspiration for you, and
Hmm.
while growing up, and later you took the stand of not listening to him for a certain while, wherein you wanted to sort of focus on your own creative techniques and figure out another realm of music, right? It must have been pretty hard. So how important is identity for any musician to establish, and how can one bring the individuality which is within them?
Okay. Well, Tony Williams, just to give you the example, Tony Williams was like a teacher for me, you
Hmm.
know, and I assimilated his playing,
Yeah,
I assimilated him, and through the study of him, I could go past the surface of his representation and
yeah,
maybe understand what type of person that he was. I mean, I met Tony Williams once when I was like 17,
wow,
but, I never had the privilege to really hang out with him or have a friendship, which would have been interesting. But still, through his music, I go like, okay, I understand what the type of person he probably was, with besides the unbelievable talent and the unbelievable resourcefulness and creativity that he had, that creativity came from somewhere. And that's not just positive places, but also the shadow side of your personality, that you deal with pain and things like that. I mean, it's not for no reason that there is a lot of those incredible places, people that the monsters that you were talking about, although they inspired us,
yeah,
self-destroyed, doctor, Michael Jackson and Elvis,
correct.
Prince, I mean, they're heroes, they're father figures, but their shadows devoured them, and that, so I think that can happen. I think if you're, we have to talk about the subject of persona, not identity, and it's not the same thing.
Yeah,
Identity is one thing, ego is one thing, persona. I think the persona becomes a very dangerous part. If your persona becomes too, you use a persona to protect yourself. It's like a shield. You don't really have to show who you truly are, but this is a show business type of thing. This could be anything, it can be an artist, but it can be a religious leader, that has a persona. You really know what that person does, after he talks to his disciples, does he really do everything that he tells his disciples to do?
yeah,
Well, if yes, then it's great. If no, I think then we have a cognitive dissonance or like a problem, which is insincere. Now the problem with the persona, if you lose your identity behind the persona, that can be very dangerous. It can be very dangerous because it can lead you to places that are not congruent with, you lose your soul to, what people would describe this as the soul. This becomes at stake. I think, um, with like Tony Williams, it was like I became a clone of like Tony Williams, and we're like, okay, I need to make room for growth.
correct.
So, and I still love Tony Williams. I mean, like we can listen to Tony Williams for the entire night, and there was something new that I would discover. But at that point, it was like I needed to make room. So it's important to kill your heroes. It's important to kill them. It's important to kill your babies, your artistic babies. It's important for like growth. So these are painful things, and it's scary to do that, but it's very important
Yeah,
that you have the strength to do that. Otherwise, you will be devoured by other persona or your own persona. You have to be able to move and not to be like, it's like armor. like your armor becomes so thick that you're not able to move anymore, and you stop living. You only exist. Now, I think, like while we talk right now, you and I, and everybody that participates and follows us,
Mhm.
right now I'm the real person. As soon as this will exist on YouTube, it's going to be a clone of me
Correct.
to a certain degree. So I think this is why it's so important to have real-time experiences, like something that is happening right now, because the real-time experience, it's much more difficult to get it, how do you say, to get a compromise or sabotage or how should I say, you know, it becomes corrupted. Like you and I in a room is going to be less misunderstandings.
Yeah.
I could something that maybe personal, it could be insulting to you, but it would be insulting to me, but in a way, because our body language, we can neutralize it. It's like, okay, well, I didn't really mean it that way. It's something that I say that is printed, can be taken out of context and can be very inflammatory and, taken out of its context. So I think that's why it's important to keep somehow the smallness of things. You know, if things get big, they can become corrupted, which, by the way, is also the same thing. As I said, the greatest ideas, jazz, rock and roll, hip hop, the greatest ideas, if they become too big, corruption enters and they become corrupted. So the greatest idea, it's only a matter of time and size. It become a storefront for BS, so to say. That's why it's important to reincarnate the true values into a new shape, just to kind of, come back to a reference, because all these things are somehow connected with each other.
Correct.
A, you know, so this is how I see it, so identity is important.
Mhm.
Authenticity is important. Be yourself. Try to, even the things that you don't like about yourself. You can improve those, but they are a part of yourself. Your shadow side. Michael Jackson. Janis Joplin. All these, Amy Winehouse. All these people that provided extreme beauty were probably not even able to provide this beauty without being in touch with their shadow side. And but you have to control it. You have to become a master of it, and don't be devoured by it. So identity, yes. Authenticity, absolutely. Ego, we have to have it in check. Persona, necessary sometimes to protect you, but it's as long as you understand the persona is for other people, not for you.
Correct. Yeah.
If you fall prey to your own magic trick, you're in trouble.
I'd like to touch upon the music education side of things.
Hmm.
You've done numerous amount of instructional videos on drum techniques during your collaboration with Hudson Music and a couple of other entities. How do scholarships sit with someone like you?
How does scholarship?
How do scholarships sit with someone like you?
Define scholarship for me at this point.
Uh, Academically, like how?
Okay,
Yeah.
just like the apparatus of okay.
Yes.
Well, why I believe that education is central, is essential to
Hmm.
pass on knowledge is very important. This is the reason why I did it. A lot of the things that I know, I didn't come up with them myself, but I got it from somewhere. Somewhere it was people's generosity. that let me in on something that is not obvious but very important. And sometimes it was just work in,
Yeah.
digging and digging and digging and digging until I found
Yeah.
this. Now, when it comes to the institution
Hmm.
of academia, okay, one of the problems that I have sometimes comes from a question that I think a lot of academic institutions cannot answer either sincerely or competent. It's a
Hmm.
very simple question. Is what are you educating people for?
Wow. Yeah.
Like project that question to any body of and then I see some problems. I mean, our education system, to a big extent, that we have, not just music, is about 200 years old, and it's been built to coexist with industrialization. It was
Yeah.
basically people were educated to become a dial that serves the machinery of industrialization. Now we entered a new time, new millennium. Like we're post-industrialization, we're post-globalization.
Yeah.
Um, we need people. It's like I grew up where you could educate someone to be a guitar player, and he will be a guitar player for the rest of his life. As you would have career spanning, people like Carlos Santana or Eric Clapton. They had careers that spanning 50 years.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be possible in the future. I think already it's not possible anymore. Like right now, we have we enter the retraining generation. People that will do something for a certain period of time, and they have their experiences, and they will go somewhere else. It could be, you could be a composer, and then you become a landscape architect, and then you go into 3D printing.
Yeah.
It could be any. So you're an artistic person, or you're more a mathematic person,
Hmm.
or you a little bit of both.
Right.
You will have to find your way to express yourself and make money somehow. So when it comes to music education, I think that question is no longer sincerely or competently answered. What are we educating people for?
Wow.
What happens to them if they go out? I believe we need massive changes in education generally, but specifically in music and education as well.
Fundamentally, it also must be quite challenging, like you mentioned, like for multifaceted individuals such as you. You're talented in different aspects of music, and then there is right from the session work that you do to the music that you create. You can always look at it as a qualification of a performer or a creator who's equally involved, such as you, in the music education realm. And you're
Mhm.
someone who's equally sensitive to a student's set of needs and imperatives. But don't you think it can also sort of be a barrier? Say you're a drummer, you make beats, and you embody multiple facets of creativity in just music. How do you sort of take a step back from these different roles when it's needed?
Well, now we come back to the question of identity.
Hmm.
You know, I don't identify myself as a drummer. I'm a musician. I'm a musician and an artist that uses the drums to express himself.
Correct.
There was a time in my life where I was a drummer, but I I made an effort to expand
Yeah.
on that, because really I came to this conclusion because I had the privilege to, through my work mainly, but through the opportunity that my work allowed me to travel all around the world and meet really interesting people. So, the circle of my friends, of course, there's some musicians, but there's some scientists, some politicians, some actors, some painters, that they all, some architects, they all do different things. And
Yeah.
we can sit together and have long conversations about things, and we always meet. You have an architect, a musician, and a lawyer,
Yeah.
and we find the subject and that is intriguing to all of us, and touches the field of our expertise to a certain degree. Say, we find, when I talk to an architect, I say, well, as a musician, I'm also an architect, but I'm not an architect of physical space. I'm an architect of time, and boom, like we connect, so we can exchange. I think this is very important to find opportunities where you're not the smartest guy in the room, and find opportunities where people are curious, people are trying to expand. And I had the privilege to have access to those people, and they were like, wow, this is interesting, and they don't need to be like people that win Nobel Prizes. It's sometimes ordinary people doing ordinary things. Like, for instance, when so I moved to New York, to the United States, and I got a green card, and I had to start to pay taxes there. At that point, I was already a kind of successful sideman, and working with famous people. And my tax lady kind of asked me, "So what do you do? How do you make your money?" I explained to her what it is. I said, "Well, let me tell you one thing. My field, I do taxes for people. I have some very, very rich people, and I have some starving artists as well, and I have some musicians that do well and some that do not well. I know who makes how much money in this town. I don't know who stays. I don't know who leaves. And in my observation, let me tell you one thing. If you stay a sideman, you're going to have some good years and some bad years. But chances are you're never going to make a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
If you want to make a substantial amount of money, you have to be your own industry, your own business, your own brand. You have to do that. And that stuck with me. No musician ever told me that. It was my tax accountant that told me that, and it stuck with me. And I was like, yeah, this is perhaps true. And this was not the only reason why I decided to be no longer a sideman. But there was other reasons too. Like sideman is a particular animal you have to withstand abuse, because not all the people that you're going to be working for, they're going to pay you money, are going to be nice to you.
Correct.
So this
Yeah.
is another reason to be a sideman. I can choose the people that I want to work with. But anyway, so I'm saying this expansion of like having different interests is essential to how I identify as to myself as a person. The drummer might become a persona for some people. But behind that persona is an identity of someone that have too many interests to just lock them out. I want the things to come true through the lens or the magnifying glass of my instrument that I know how to operate. And the drums is something that I know to operate, fairly well. So I'm trying to use it to do exactly that.
Wonderful. I'm also interested and intrigued to understand your process of creating music. I'm sure it's drawn by a lot of influences and some inspiration that you draw for the music. You've put out your music in a certain vocabulary, and there is a certain territory associated with it, right? So,
Mhm.
where and how are these ideas born for you? And is it born as a story, or is it the idea in itself? And how does it unfold?
Okay, this is something that I've been talking about frequently. I believe basically the creative process. There's two different approaches that we can take. I mean, there's more, but there's two main approaches the way I see it. Right, there's a neurotic approach
Hmm.
and there's a schizophrenic approach.
Got it.
The neurotic approach is like, let me explain to you the neurotic approach. It's like I'm painting a picture, and
Hmm.
I get my scaffold, get a piece of paper or whatever tools, pencil or brushes. I I look out of the window and I take this impression in,
Hmm.
and I'm trying to replicate this. I remember, or maybe I do it from memory, maybe I just look at it, but I'm trying to replicate from what I see, or I try to replicate what I have in my mind. You
Got it.
know, I use my skill to replicate what I have in my mind. That's a neurotic approach. The schizophrenic approach is different.
Hmm.
The schizophrenic approach deals much more with your subconscious. Let me give you another example. Like, for instance, a Rorschach test, that's used in psychology. Like, you have a
Hmm.
book, you
Yeah.
open the book with its pages, and you put some ink in it, and you close the book, and then you reopen it again. Then it has certain shapes, and you might discover a butterfly in it, or you might discover some shape. You're like, okay, there's a butterfly.
Right.
The same thing with if you look at the clouds in the sky,
Hmm.
say, oh, this looks like a dog with an umbrella,
Correct.
and I can describe it to my girlfriend, and she doesn't see it. No, 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 look, see that thing? This is the nose, and there's the eyes, and then it's the umbrella, and then she sees it as well. So
Right.
this will be an artistic process because I'm not the only person that discovers the dog, but I'm able to articulate it so other people can see it as well.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so those are two different things. So when I do things creatively, I jump back and forth between those two things.
Got it.
Sometimes a mistake can
Yeah.
be a really powerful
Hmm.
opportunity to discover something that your subconscious already knows, or you emotionally you have it, but your stubbornness and your ego doesn't allow it to come out. So there's certain techniques, like the Rorschach test would be such a technique
Hmm.
to kind of like trick your mind to take a back seat and shut up so your subconscious can express itself. So in order to take things to take shape of things,
Yeah.
sometimes you have an idea, and that might be, oh, okay, you become obsessed with it, and you figure out it's a disappointment, or it gets frustrating because it does you can't get it to mirror the vision that you had.
Yeah.
And there's two ways to do it. You can keep on digging and keep on working on it, keep on working, but you somehow will have to figure out what keeps you from succeeding. And that's usually the way you look at it. It's your vantage point. Back in the days, I used to be extremely perfectionistic, you
Hmm.
know, which involves your ego, and it makes your life miserable and the life of everybody else that surrounds you. When I realized at some point that I artistically I can afford to not be perfectionistic, as long as I'm able to get the idea from A to B. So right now, for me, clarity is much more important than perfection. I don't concern myself with perfection, only with clarity. So this takes a big burden of my shoulders, something that presses creative people down is the aim for creativity. Creativity is a fata morgana. The closer you come, the further it moves away. So at this point, I don't concern myself with something that has not to be perfect. It has to work. in a good way. So um, then I have an idea and say, okay, not everything can be created from a genius, something that doesn't have a beginning, really. Most people steal from other people. Frank Zappa once said, good composer borrow, great composers steal. What he means by that is the great composer steals, but he doesn't get caught stealing.
Yeah.
Everybody steals. Everybody steals. And I think you do it with respect. But when you take an idea that someone else had and you're able to deal with that nobody realizes it, then it means you've been putting enough of your own thinking into it so it can become something new. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
I think it's quite arrogant to like say, well, this is genius. Most people that I believe that people would provide the attribute of, oh, this is genius. I don't think they're genius. Like let's say the Beatles. I don't think they were geniuses. Extremely talented people working extremely hard.
Hard. Yeah.
You know, this is far more often what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the label of genius is much more easier marketable
Yeah.
than oh, these are talented and they work really hard.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about geniuses far too often. There's not that many around. Mostly a lot of work and a lot of desperation and a lot of strength to keep on going. That in the end provides the result that people are touched or impressed by. Does this answer your question?
Very much. Very much. I have another follow up question to that. How often does this vision get modified or improved upon? And then you feel this great surge of satisfaction that I've made this happen, in terms of the process that we spoke of.
You know, with with almost anything that I did in my life
Hmm.
that I'm proud of right now,
Yeah.
there was a moment where I was really scared. Like when we talk about um, those instructional videos, for instance,
Yeah. Yeah.
I went so deep down the rabbit hole to compile this volume.
Hmm.
This is um, mm, and I did it with a partner, with a friend of mine, and we were looking at this, and I completely lost distance from it. I couldn't judge it anymore because I was so immersed in it. And it was great to have someone on the outside. I was like, this is terrible. People are going to laugh at me. This is so stupid. Saying, listen,
Yeah.
we got to put this out. And then we asked Hudson Music if they were interested to uh, to distribute it, because we produce it by ourselves.
Okay.
And Hudson was like, "Oh, this is great, we'd love to have that, And it became probably one of the best-selling, if not the best-selling tutorial on drumming technique, which right before it hit the public eye, I had lost confidence about it, And now the thing, I was much younger back then than I'm right now, and I have a little bit more, a little bit more confidence in my confidence, so to say. And I think it's a part of the creative process. It's a part of the shadow side, the destructive side that we discussed before.
Right.
That to go somewhere where nobody has gone before is scary, and it can fail. It can fail, and it's very hard. The thought to bear that it can fail.
Mhm.
So for me, it's like just pushing through. Like developing a habit of like not to listen to every little demon or that crawls on my shoulder and tries to give me a wise blah 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 blah. I was like, okay, take a number and have a seat. I got to deal with you later. It's just basically just managing your focus. And to be able to do it long enough for it to come out. So basically, there's a certain fate in it. I'm also privileged that I have a group of people
Yeah.
around me. Although very often it is a very solitary process to do the important work. My girlfriend is an extremely a distinguished uh, observer of
Okay.
things, because she knows how I how I behave behind a drum kit or behind a computer, or when we do something else, or I have a group of friends that will give their opinion on it, which is very helpful. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, say, you know what, I think you think too much about this. Don't worry about it. Focus on this. I think this is more of like a problem.
Yeah.
So as said, having the right people around you is important, and,
Sure.
and they help you. They help you too.
How vulnerable do you feel each time there is a music launch happening, or there's new music to be out, for instance, uh, in terms of how the audiences might receive it? Most people sort of anguish and agonize over each cough that comes from the audience and each ring these days on the mobile phone, right? How secure do
Oh,
you feel in terms of this? As to, I've done my best and now I'm putting it out in the public domain.
right. Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question. And okay, this question addresses probably most of my concern of where I still want to grow
Yeah.
as an artist, as a musician, as a human being, is being able to allow vulnerability. It comes back to the first question that you have. People are being touched. You can communicate with people emotionally
Yeah.
on the highest degree if you surrender that you're not a machine, that you're a human being, that you're okay with failure.
Hmm.
I think this is the highest level of artistry, being able to allow vulnerability. You can impress people, you can do all sorts of stuff. There's a famous quote of Bruce Lee was saying, I can be cocky, I can do all sorts of things, but to really
Yeah.
express yourself honestly,
Yeah.
is very difficult, my friend.
Right.
And basically, it's because of that vulnerability. And even for Bruce Lee at this point, who was much younger than I am right now, and a person that has provided, made a lot of contribution, maybe deep down inside, he was a profoundly insecure person, and was struggling with that. And
Yeah.
otherwise, he wouldn't have understood that. And if I look at people, some of the old guys, that start to be old until they die, or until their body doesn't allow them to no longer do that. Like someone like Wayne Shorter,
Mm.
he has this quality. He's a true magician, like, because he allows himself to be vulnerable. And when you allow yourself this, um, the possibility to fail,
Yeah.
the real dragon can come out. Something, because it's something that is bigger than your ego.
Yeah.
I think that's when it comes out. And that's also, I realize I perform the best when I don't think. when my mind is completely blank,
Mm-hmm.
and I can keep it blank for the
Okay.
entirety of like I don't want to be distraught. Like I can be distracted. I can be distracted as well by a sheer amount of you know love from your audience. It feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good to anyone to be to step out on the stage and you have an entire arena cheering.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a good feeling. You can get addicted to this,
Yeah.
and if you addicted your persona, you that it's like a drug. It's a very powerful drug. So you can also be addicted to the fear of have a heckler in the audience that will say something or do something. Okay, artistically I can provide the best performance if I acknowledge it that it is, but I somehow need to be able to calibrate it on to which degree it affects me, in a positive as in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
This, this I don't want to be misunderstood because I value an audience that shows up to come to see me play. As this is we had a song with the band Nerve. It's called "To Listen Is to Love," and I really believe this. Like one of the highest privileges that one human can give to another human is his attention. So I hold my audience in an extremely high esteem, extreme as high esteem. But I learned from from my experience as a sideman.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with some people that were equally talented, equally successful,
Yeah.
but for some of them, it was really pleasurable to work for, and for other one, it was very stressful.
Got it.
And I came to the conclusion for the people that it is pleasurable to work with, they have an attitude. I will do. I have a talent. I'm aware of it. I will try to do my best. And what I give to you tonight is the best that I can give. And if it's not enough, I'm very sorry, but this is what I have. Where the insecure person needs applause and he will reach for applause for anything. He will even turn into someone else in order to do that. You know. So there are some very famous people, very successful. They became devoured by this need for applause. And we all know who I'm talking about. It's very easy to understand. Oh, okay, this guy is turning over backwards to remain successful, where other people are perfectly fine with. Yeah, I had my time where thousands of people were looking at me, and now it's a couple of hundred, but I still can do this myself, whatever. And I aspire to be in that category of artists simply because it's a much better life to have. You know? Success is not everything. Money is not everything.
Yep.
Most of the time, you're not on stage, and I have to be able to live with that person. As I'm saying, I'm still working on that. And this is a long process. And
Yeah.
I have my good moments, and I have my moments that are not that good. But I'm becoming. I think I'm becoming better about it.
You're being very modest there.
Well, that's vulnerability.
Right.
Important.
Right.
Yeah.
In one of your documentaries, you've quoted that the first half of your pursuit was how to learn how to fly, right? And in the second half, you'd consider landing. Where are you
Mhm.
right now with regard to that pursuit?
Um, Well, okay, after 30 years in New York, moving to Switzerland, it's it's a different line. It's a part of landing. I decided I needed a different geographical point to
Okay.
land. Uh, somehow also returning to family a little bit. You
Got it.
know, uh, and returning and somehow like really understand what is really important to me, and that is a landing process, and it's like uh we just had a unbelievable this pandemic, this global pandemic. This is something that touched everybody's life, to various degrees. And it has touched my life as well, and there was a lot of time to think about things, and how they were before, how they were going to be after. So the process of landing for me came at the same time with something that entered all our lives, where we could take things that we took for granted no longer for granted, you know. So I was like, okay, I'm very well aware for the time that I still have in this existence, um, you know, what will be the best way, to the most creative way, um, the most beautiful way to
Yeah.
spend it. So I think that came, and once again, the landing thing. You need the right people around you to show you, hey, you can land here.
Right.
It would be nice. So this is it, but it's also, it is a process. It is a process. The
Yeah.
landing,
Yeah.
because the flying is the flying. I can still fly, like whenever I play music, but my vantage point will be a different one, a slightly different one. I mean, I always want to have room for the inner child to play and to roam and to express. The child can never die. You know, it's more with the childishness that you have to deal. You know, so the old, no matter how old I get, I need to provide room for the child to play. And when this is happening, I'm flying. You know, but I can't have an existence of flying, because at a certain age your body doesn't allow you to do it in the same way as with a young body. you know
Yeah.
and that is also, for me, when I observe older performers that up until very high age can provide magnificent experiences to their audiences, where others cannot, are no longer capable of doing that, because their body and their mind uh, regresses. So I think when you stop, you don't actually stop, but you move backwards. But that's why you have to move. You have to push forwards in order to keep moving. You know, this is the reward. It's difficult, to push onwards all the time. It's difficult sometimes to retain your curiosity.
Yeah.
But I think those are, curiosity is one of the key elements of living versus existing, you know. And I have the extreme privilege that I have a profession where I can express this. It's wonderful. I mean, I do have hobbies and stuff, but
Yeah.
it takes care of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Like music is my teacher. I learn things from music that I can apply in my life, and I do learn things. And you know, I mean, I just started to cook, which is something that most people do. I never cooked in my life. I couldn't cook, you know.
Right.
I'm discovering, oh, and some things that I know about music. Well, this is the same as like making a good song. It's the same as, you know,
Yeah.
making a good performance, you know.
Right.
It has to do with time, measurement, calibration, taste, not too much, you know,
And
just the right
improvisation
amount.
also.
Totally, you know.
Yeah.
So I discovered that maybe I'm a good cook, you know, I could be a good cook,
Yeah.
although I started very late, you know.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying. Like the landing is a different point of view. But I'm in
Right.
the process, and I'm doing pretty good. You know, Corona was landing for a lot of people.
Right.
You know, painful.
Very much.
So it helped. You know,
Yeah.
it helped because literally I was flying. You know, traveling constantly,
Correct.
constantly on the way to the airport, constantly packing, constantly doing unpacking, and to have uh, outside you know, occurrences
Mm-hmm.
being prohibitive of that, you know,
Yeah.
in a way was a blessing in disguise, because I had to really go deep in, you know, where I could not go outside anymore. I had to go inside more forcefully go inside, you know, more sensitively, and you know, and it was also great that I started with this new tool and started new music, you know, something that I had to do by myself, you know, to learn algorithmic programming, you know, learning about probability, learning about chaos. You have to do it by yourself, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so, and I could do it, you know, at the privacy of my home, and that's what I did. So uh, it was a blessing in disguise, you know, as
Got it.
horrible as it was, you know,
Yeah.
artistically,
Yeah.
and a part of landing.
I also noticed that you have a fascination for sharks. You seem to have quite a vast collection displayed
Yeah, I
in your
do.
showcase. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you know, most people have an obsession with something, you
Yeah.
know, and this is something that comes from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think, uh, I think it goes back to when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old,
Yeah.
and my parents took me to the movie to see a
Mm-hmm.
James Bond movie.
Okay.
I think it was Thunderball. Yeah, definitely it was Thunderball. And in that movie, it has a scene where the villain has a has a swimming pool where he
Okay.
puts like the people that he doesn't like, you know, throws them in for the sharks to eat. You know? And I was really impressed by that as a kid, because more so than dinosaurs or fantasy figures, say, oh, this is a real animal that can eat you, you know, not in the swimming pool, but in the swimming pool. So of course, I developed a real shark phobia. You know how, you know, I kind of loved sharks, but I was also very scared of them. You know,
Got it.
so whenever there was sharks, you know, I was into it. So getting older, I started to appreciate more of like how old and how perfect these animals are. You know, they were living fossils in a way.
Yeah.
You know, they're, you know, past more than 60 million years old and virtually unchanged. That means there's something right about them, you know, uh, despite the narrative that we make around them as like terrible creatures, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, every once in a while something, there's a bad encounter, but it's you know, like much more people are getting killed by dogs or cows or other animals, you know, and so, but you know, it has a spectacular mythology, you know, and I'm interested in like mythology, as we talked about before, you know, like the persona, and you know, and they're mythological creatures, you know, and I started to collect those things. It was a
Cute.
joke. It was a joke, but all of a sudden I had so many of them
That
that Aaron, the engineer, would like nervous. Say, hey, let's do a record about shark, about a
yeah,
conceptual one. So, and like the
yeah.
cover of the Nerve record is made out of a small portion of my shark collection. It's like we made the Nerve font from it. So that's basically it. And I mean, I went diving with sharks, and I went cage diving with great whites, which was fantastic. It was like, actually, since I did that, I'm not scared of sharks anymore. You know, it was almost like, oh, okay, very humbling experience, because you know you witness an animal like this not in the zoo, but in its natural habitat. You're the guest,
Correct.
and you have to take it easy, and kind of like, it's a privilege to
Yeah.
be able to observe those animals in their habitat. It's amazing. I mean, apart from how big they are, and um, it was great. Yeah. So that's it with the sharks in a nutshell.
But speaking about your fascination for animals in general, back in your place in Rushlikon, you got
Mm.
a floor dedicated for reptiles. You pet some very exotic animals that include snakes, alligators, tarantulas. How do you pet them, and would it be appropriate to call you Switzerland's Doctor Doolittle?
No, well, first of all,
Yeah.
that's my parents' house. It's not
Okay.
my house.
Okay.
I mean, we still have a lot of greenery in here, but this is because
Hmm.
my girlfriend is a very passionate gardener, and
Okay.
and she's a landscape architect, and
Lovely.
it really benefits me. But that was my parents' house
Okay.
that you were talking about, and my dad, he's a jazz musician,
Yeah.
but he studied zoology,
Oh wow. Okay.
and he didn't be he be his career as a musician, as a hobby musician, took off. So we're like, oh well, I can play with all these people now, and so he threw the zoology overboard, but he remained a very passionate zoologist, and
Lovely.
he has a big, very, very big passion for animals. He was traveling around the world because he was a musician, and wherever he went, my dad spent months living in the jungle by himself, studying animals and stuff like that. So he has very a, a pretty profound knowledge specifically about reptiles,
Yeah.
and also arachnids, like spiders. So I
Yeah.
also grew up with scorpions and spiders and stuff like that.
Wow.
But so we had so many animals. We had crocodiles, and giant salamanders, iguanas, and we also had cats, and rabbits. But I grew up with a lot of animals and snakes. We had boas, like long, 4-meter snakes, and that was normal. I didn't even realize that it was not normal. Because they were always around. Even we even had flying foxes, bats and stuff,
Incredible.
and a lot of animals from India. And because he was studying zoology,
Yeah.
he had a license to keep some of these animals, and he kept them really well. I mean, some of our the animals that we have, they grew much older than they usually grow in captivity.
Oh, okay.
So he really loves these animals, and he has a relationship with them, and yeah. So I basically, other than the music, my love for nature and animals comes from my childhood.
Got it. Let's move to the final segment of our interview, which is the rapid fire segment. And I'm going to give you very concise questions. You don't have to think too much,
Yes.
and you can be spontaneous with your answers. All right. So, first question for you, Jojo. What is that one song that always makes you cry?
Um, what's the name of that song? It's called Daddy
Right.
Dear, is the world really round? That makes me cry.
Okay. On the
What's the
contrary,
name? Yeah,
what is your
yeah.
favorite guilty
Daddy Dear.
pleasure?
It's called Daddy Dear.
Daddy
Daddy
dear.
Dear.
Right.
Yeah.
What is your favorite guilty pleasure song on the contrary?
Oh. I don't really have a guilty pleasure song, but and sometimes I would listen to some fusion that is a little bit on the guilty pleasure side.
Okay. Okay. If you could put an all-star drum bass electronic project together, who'd be in
uh,
it?
the guys in my band Nerve.
Wonderful.
Well, if it was an also, of course, Aphex Twin will be in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, if I had to give you two options, because from what I've noticed, you're someone who is for health on the road and you snack on dry fruits, etc. Or if I had to give you some Swiss chocolates, which one would you pick?
Chocolate.
What's your favorite kind of chocolate?
Oh, we're going into the, I really like dark chocolates.
Hmm.
I like dark chocolate with almonds.
Okay.
You know, I like those chocolate powdered almonds.
Hmm.
Very addictive. There's some chocolate that small shops in Switzerland make that's probably not available in most places around the world. It's very local.
Right.
I mean, for the Swiss, they really know the chocolate stuff. So it's not a part of sweetening the landing. It's the chocolate that they have here. Is because I'm addicted to chocolate.
Got it. Yeah. What are the top two spiritual techniques that you embody at this point in time?
Uh, Gratitude. And if that doesn't work, more gratitude.
Okay.
Gratitude, I think, sums it up. Yeah.
What are the top five bands that you're listening to right now, and something that we might want to check out?
Oh, bands.
Yeah.
Well, right now, I've not really been listening to bands. I'm
Okay.
listening more to composers. Um, yeah, I don't been listening to bands. I sometimes, for a very specific time, if I have an interest in something, well, I would listen to a band particular from a particular,
Yeah.
um, but not really. I don't really listen to a band particularly right now.
Okay. We have a lot of audience from India and other parts of the world. They are very intrigued to know some anecdotes during your time with Nina Simone and with Michelle. You had
Okay.
quite a stint with them, so they're interested in knowing some interesting anecdotes you had as a performer with them.
Well, I, um, the Nina Simone thing, like I quoted that once, like I worked with Nina Simone while I was working with Monty Alexander's band, and we
Okay.
were backup. We were doing backup for like a lot of people at that point, like Dizzy Gillespie, etc., etc. And I once mentioned this in an interview, and I can't get rid of it anymore. Like I'm always like, oh, what about Nina Simone? Now, okay, my experience with like Nina Simone was, she was like very manic at this at the time where I was working with her, and I was not really acquainted with much of her work.
Okay.
And we did not have a single rehearsal. We just went out there and started playing. And her command, her presence. And I have to say, this not only goes for like Nina Simone, but this also goes for a lot of the old guys that I had the privilege of like working, like Dizzy or like Monty Alexander. They could just start playing, and the clarity that they, you know, would communicate was, you knew exactly what's gonna happen next.
Mhm.
This is like a skill that not a lot of people still have, which are alive today. That I'm very glad to. This is something I would say that really, separates my experience with the old guys. That from the 40s and the 50s and 60s. That as when I was really really young, I could work with them. It's like this ability to communicate musically, and with Nina Simone, that was very very strong both ways, to the audience and with the band at the same time, without even um, very strong, very strong point of view artistically.
Got it. Yeah.
With Michelle, what was different between Nina Simone was already, well, she was my age right now.
Okay. Okay.
It's like, I think it was like around 60. And And Michelle was very young, and with Michelle, I worked with Michelle maybe like 3 years, like even before she was on the radar. And what was really cool with Michelle is, although I came from Switzerland, there was a lot of the stuff that I was listening to
Hmm.
that a lot of the funk drummers at that particular time in New York, their style was not. It was a different style. New York funk was one particular style. It was very kind of gospel oriented, very heavy backbeat. But I grew up listening to stuff like Isley Brothers and the Brothers Johnson, where people like Harvey Mason played the drums,
Yeah.
which had a lighter touch and a more sparkly atmosphere. Also the stuff that Mike Clark did, and Michelle was deeply into this music.
Yeah.
And when we connected, we're like, well, hey, all that stuff. I am having trouble to find guys in New York who know those records. So this was kind of like how we connected towards old records that I listened to when in Zurich when I was a kid, and she listened to in DC when she was a kid, and we met in New York somehow. Uh, and I learned a bunch of things from like Michelle. I think I should consider her to be one of the most talented persons that I collaborated with. It was really fantastic. The music was such a high level, and it was fresh. And it was just like, well, it was like on a highway with extreme speed. And
Yeah.
like it even came to like a point where it was too much for me and I needed a break. you know.
Feel you.
But Michelle is an incredible artist, and uh, well, obviously not obscure, but I think maybe one of the reasons that she didn't become bigger. I mean, I rate her talent to be on the level of like whatever Prince or some other people,
Right.
but she was very political, and
Got
she
it.
sang about things that a lot of people just didn't want to hear.
Sure. In the
Yeah.
interest of time, I have one last question for you, which is a custom in all of my interviews, and I ask all my distinguished guests this very question. So, Jojo, here's the question. Down in the distant horizon, what would you want to be remembered as?
What do I want to be remembered? What do I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah. What do you want to be remembered as?
I don't really care.
Okay.
I don't really care. I
All
don't
right.
really care. I'm just trying to do. I don't care what people will be remembering me with. I don't. I don't aspire to immortality.
Mm-hmm.
I come to terms that I have one existence or this existence, and I make the best out of it, and that's it. I think any aspiration to like hope or people will remember me is like trying to get a grasp of a little piece of immortality. I don't care for it. No.
Very, very interesting take. On that note, we will continue to celebrate the dozen marvelous musical pieces that you have for the world, and your showmanship that you have displayed and still happening in the next set of shows that you have to put out. And in terms of your rich composition skills, and it sort of projects a very rich and intense life that all of us sort of await. So thank you so much for
Well,
that. Yeah.
I have to give credit to the guys in my band because
Hmm.
they also collaborate
Hmm.
on a lot of the music,
Right.
with Nerve.
Right.
But thank you.
And before we conclude, this interview will additionally air on Big FM Shillong and Azol on the Sunday show between 5 to 6 p.m. And it'll also be on my YouTube channel and Apple Podcasts. I'll be sure to share these links with you. We'll continue to stay in touch. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great blessing, honor, and a privilege. Thank you so much for your time, Jojo.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope to see you soon in India or wherever you are.
Thanks,
All the
thanks, and
best.
take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.